So I've been asking myself the last few weeks, how did I get up here, a Boy Scout from Troop 12, St. Mary's in Winchester, over 60 years ago, talking about the Girl Scouts. And I think if you had asked me 60 years ago, I probably would have laughed. But about a year ago, Tom Savini received a copy of a scrapbook that's sitting out on the front hall table that is a pictorial presentation of the building of Camp Joy. And Camp Joy sat up on South Border Road in the Fells. And so Tom, when he received the book, knew that the pictorial was basically about Rotarians. And since I'm one of the few Rotarians in my age bracket who remember a lot of things, he called me and said, would you come up and take a look at the scrapbook? But if those of you that know Tom, you don't get off that easy. So after he had me in the room and I started looking at the pictures and started telling him who all the Rotarians were, oh, he said, would you mind doing a little history project? And he knew that that's all I needed was a little challenge. So I've been working on it off and on for the last year, and here we are here tonight. The Globe referred to this undertaking as one of the greatest examples of community spirit in New England history. And at the end of my presentation, I hope you leave here feeling the same way. I'll give you a little short bit about Girl Scouting here in Winchester as a background to the story of the cabin. In 1912, at a time when the United States, women in the United States couldn't yet vote, there was a shifting to a progressive trend in thought which brought Julia Gordon Low to spark a worldwide movement inspiring girls to embrace together their individuality, strength, and intellect. Juliet, affectionately known as Daisy by her family and close friends, gathered 18 girls in her hometown of Savannah, Georgia, to share what she learned abroad about a new outdoor and educational program for youth, and with this, the Girl Scout movement was born. In the words of Juliet Gordon Low, the founder of Girl Scouting in America, truly ours is a circle of friendships united by our ideals. And Girl Scouting made it to Winchester in April of 1917. Now on April the 2nd, 1917, the U.S. declared war on Germany. And it was just about that same time Girl Scouting in Winchester was first endorsed by the Winchester chapter of the Special Aid Society for American Preparedness. And that was a national group of women who banded together, formed chapters throughout the country, and in their own cities and towns raised money and did a lot of, as one of the members of one of the chapters once said, we did all the things that nobody else wanted to do. And it was announced that a Girl Scout troop here in Winchester was going to be formed with Miss Helen Lane as leader. Helen Lane was a kindergarten teacher and deaconess at the parish of the Epiphany, right down the street here on Church Street. Yeah. Now in May of 1917, several troops of Girl Scouts were being formed under the auspices of the Special Aid Society. Mrs. Addison Pike was named the first commissioner of the Girl Scouts in Winchester. And here's some excerpts from the Winchester Star article from May 11th of 1917. Mrs. Carl Dennett, assisted by Mrs. Stephen Roblin, both of Boston, gave a comprehensive talk of the Girl Scout movement Monday morning in the town hall. The presence of military men could hardly have been more impressive than were these two ladies in their broad hats and scout uniforms. And Mrs. Dennett's talk was clear, direct, and to the point. We regret that personal charm and inspiration are not easily transmitted on paper. A girl today can do practically everything that a boy can do. This has come to be recognized in the present world war as never before. Today, women are driving motor buses, acting as conductors, policemen, working in all types of factories, in all classes of work, heretofore handled by men. What is the purpose of the Girl Scout organization? To make boys of girls? To teach them to dig trenches and to fight? Those were some of the questions asked by the uninformed. Emphatically, no. At the earliest possible moment, the following principles are inculcated into the impressionable mind by intelligent leaders and directors. So there were 8 points that the Girl Scouts lived by. Loyalty to country, mother and father, usefulness, service to others. Girl Scouts were friends to all and sisters to all other Scouts. Purity, kindness to animals, obedience to orders, the duty of cheerfulness, and thrift. By June of 1917, there were already 5 troops formed in Winchester, and the girls were very active in their work. A fireman was called upon to teach a senior class ways and means for saving oneself and others in case of a fire, and he asked if the necessity arose for knotting sheets together, how many in the room could tie more than just a granny knot. He was greatly surprised that their knowledge of knot tying equaled his own. The Girl Scouts are taught semaphore. The system is identical to that used in the Army. First aid, nursing, dietetics, sewing, knitting, cooking, care of children. So in those early days, they were trying to prepare them to be of great assistance to the country if need be in this time of war. Now until 1931, the local Girl Scouts had no home of their own. They used Camp Cedar Hill in Waltham for most of their outdoor experiences. But in 1931, the Brooks Estate Trust in Medford invited the Winchester Girl Scouts to use a portion of the Brooks property for a cabin which would headquarter their programs. In May of 1931, fundraising began for the cabin, and a date was set for a rally and dedication to be held at the Brooks Estates on Saturday, June 6, 1931. We move ahead to June. It was a source of great pleasure to the council to have Mrs. Shepherd Brooks and Mr. Gorham Brooks present at the dedication of the cabin. The Girl Scouts all repeated with Commissioner Hall a promise to always love and cherish the cabin. Reverend George Hale Reed, who was the pastor at the Unitarian Church, he was also a charter member of Rotary, talked a while to the girls and called their attention to the fact that their new home was a cabin, not a house or a mansion or a palace, made of logs, symbolizing the out of doors in the pioneer days, the Lincoln days of our country. More than 200 persons gathered with 100 Girl Scouts, so that's quite a crowd, 300 people I would think, in 1931, with the leaders, and attended the dedication of the new cabin at the Brooks Estates at 3 o'clock that afternoon. Now, how did Camp Joy get its name? When I started my research, I always figured, well, it's because it's a happy, lovely, wonderful place to be. It brings you a lot of joy. But no, in 1945, the camp and cabin at the Brooks Estates was dedicated to the memory of Winchester's Girl Scouting great benefactor, Lucy Waterman Joy. From June 2nd, 1945 forward, the camp will be appropriately called Camp Joy. As long as the Girl Scouts enjoy camping, the spirit of Mrs. Joy will live on with them at this beautiful spot. So now we'll fast forward to 1948. In April of 1948, a revocable permit was issued by the MDC for the Girl Scouts to build a cabin on the Middlesex Fells Reservation on South Border Road in Winchester. And in October of 1948, the Girl Scout representatives discussed plans for building a cabin to replace Camp Joy. In 1949, on May 15th, the Girl Scouts had a dedication ceremony at the site in the Fells where the new camp and the cabin will be located. This kicked off the drive to raise $15,000 for the year-round recreation center. The campaign is known as Buy a Log. And I might interject here that the MDC, when they provided the land, luckily enough, I was able to get a hold of the person in the state who handles the state MDC archives, and I have the original minutes of the meetings and the actual letter giving the Girl Scouts permission to use the land. So about 700 Girl Scouts, their families and friends gathered at the new site on Sunday afternoon. 700 were in that little spot up in the fells just to dedicate the site. More than 50% of the girls, 57% of the girls in Winchester of scouting age were in scouting, and hence the need for this new cabin. Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Forbes Norris, also a Rotarian, spoke of the need for scouting and its lessons of citizenship. The Winchester Women's Republican Club voted to make a donation to the Girl Scout drive for a new cabin. And they also wanted everyone to know that there were no tents or pavilions put up either for the dedication or for future use, because they were putting every dime that they had towards buying logs to build that cabin. And in June of that year, 1949, ads started to appear in the Star. Here's one: did you know that 58 out of every 100 girls of Scout age in Winchester were Girl Scouts? That is one reason why they need a new, larger, year-round recreation center for day camp, weekend camping, overnight square dances, father-daughter powwow, plays, and all the amazing variety of activities which volunteer leaders provide for young girls. Buy a log today. And then it gave them the address where they could send their check.
How much were the logs?
Well, the cost of the logs were from $1 to $100. So 3 troops, in June of that same year, 1949, 3 troops started to rush to buy logs to build the new $15,000 cabin in the fells. Troop 3, 8th grade girls led by Mrs. Howard McCauley have been cooking over hot stoves for the last 2 weeks, making delicious batches of fudge and selling them for 85 cents a pound to buy 5 logs for the cabin. We have logs ranging in price from $100 down to $1. Many of these girls also took active part in the operetta Sunnyside, directed by Mrs. William McClintock, given in January, which bought the first $100 log. Lincoln School Troop 7. Now, Lincoln School back in those days was down on Wesley Street, where the Wesley Street Senior Housing is now. That was the location of the Lincoln School. They showed that they were good to the last drip when they collected and sold pounds of bacon drippings. Unfortunately, the price was not as high as it was during the war, and it's a lot of work to find markets. Back in World War II, they had bacon dripping drives, and households saved their bacon drippings, because from the bacon drippings they got glycerin, which was used to make bombs. So, and unfortunately, no war, there was not a great need for bacon drippings. But the girls did make a tidy profit, with which they brought 7 of the shorter logs that go up near the roof. Troop 18 at Wyman, which Mrs. Arthur Pratt directs, the Wyman School, the building is still there, it's now a condo down here on Church Street, had left some, curbed their appetite so that they had some left in their treasury, which would buy a brick or 2 for the fireplace. Other troops are now dreaming up tricks which will make their contributions look like major logging camp operations. At the same time, the Water and Sewer Board is installing water and sewer service at the new Girl Scout cabin in the Fells. So they trenched in from South Border Road about 500 feet up to the site of the new cabin. And I think it's further along in my notes, but I think the Girl Scouts, out of their funds, paid for the supplies, and the town supplied the manpower to put in the water and sewer. And the Boy Scouts are being very gracious in offering us the hospitality of the headquarters, where we may secure water until our pipes are connected. Now, if you go up Mystic Valley Parkway, and where Myrtle Terrace comes into Mystic Valley Parkway and South Border Road, that's the junction where the street changes, and on the right you'll see a house, and a portion of the house is all fieldstone. That was the Boy Scout headquarters for many, many years. So that's where they tied in the water line to take up into the woods on a temporary basis until the Girl Scouts got theirs. In July of 1949, The Winchester Hospital used to have a signboard down on the common that sat on Laraway Road. Forget that the overpass wasn't there. This is when the trains ran on the ground. And the hospital used it for all sorts of information pertaining to the hospital, whether it be a fund drive or a blood drive or just information, how many accidents there have been at the emergency room in the past 6 months. But they lent the downtown bulletin board to the Girl Scouts so that they could use that to promote their Buy-A-Log program. So the board had been covered with an announcement of the fund drive to build a cabin for the Girl Scouts, and the sketch of the new cabin was placed in the center of the board. So now we got to a point where the Girl Scouts had run dry. They couldn't fulfill their obligation to come up with the money to build this $15,000 cabin that they had envisioned. So what to do? So it was a hot August day in 1949 when Al Elliott, affectionately known as Mr. Rotary, and as I said to some of my fellow Rotarians last week at our 90th celebration, in 90 years of Rotary, there's been no greater Rotarian than Al Elliott. He was approached about the Rotary making an additional donation to the Girl Scouts towards the construction of a cabin on South Border Road. After thinking about the request, Al said he would take it to the club and get back with an answer. Because Al went to the club, and Al was a builder here in town, and he suggested to the rest of the members, instead of giving them financial support, why don't we just build it for them? So, according to the Rotary notes of August 1949, the Rotary Club was going to build the Girl Scout cabin in the Fells. By that is meant that the men of the club are going to build this new building for the Girl Scouts with their own hands. Recently it was voted by the Rotary Club of Winchester to contribute the planning, the supervision, and the fruits of their own labor to this most worthy community cause. With the money already raised and the hope of more to come from efforts in the way of planning and labor costs by the club, the members will enable this well-planned building to be erected by early this fall. Now, this statement was made in August of 1949. There's nothing done up there except trenched with some pipes. But the Rotary Club said, we'll have it ready by early fall. So under the able leadership of Al Elliott, together with Nick Fitzgerald, Harry Sheffalo, Sid Elliott, Bill Cleary, and Charlie Murphy, plans are underway to make this one of the most unique community efforts that the Rotary has ever undertaken. The new plans, so Rotary, I guess, wasn't happy with the original plans. They had their own ideas of what they thought the Girl Scouts should have, and it wasn't a log cabin. The new plans were drawn up by Bill Davies, a Winchester architect. They were approved by the state and national officials. And then the ground was broken, the water and sewer lines had already been laid, and a portion of the money necessary for the equipment, building materials, and skilled labor had already been pledged, about $7,500. But Rotarians buttonholed friends, neighbors, and local companies for donations of materials such as bricks for the fireplace, roofing, paint, plumbing equipment, kitchen equipment, with the necessary planning and installation being given free. Construction started in September with a target date of early December for completion. Now here's an excerpt from a letter from Olive K. Miller, who was the chairman on the Girl Scout side of the building of the cabin. Faith has been partially fulfilled with gifts of almost 500 people totaling $7,600. Of this amount was spent a better part of $2,500 to run town water and sewer 360 feet up to the site. A permanent and foolproof safeguard well worth the money. Our former cabin, this is the one in the Brooks Estates, too small for a growing scout population of over 500, was sold for $900 to the VFW. Now the VFW in Winchester had a piece of land, they didn't have a building, so they bought the old Girl Scout cabin and dismantled it at the Brooks Estates and brought it here to Winchester and reassembled it as their new headquarters. The Girl Scouts themselves have done a heartwarming job of raising money. Susie sold seashells, 6 cents. Ellen picked blueberries, $1. Mary cleaned house, 25 cents. Jean's babysitting, 80 cents. One fruit sold fat for $7. Another maiden sold fudge for $12. It's a big effort, but a small total. Now the Rotary Club has made this bang-up community-wide project that it should be by offering their personal labor for the actual construction. However, with our bank balance of $5,500, we must have another $400 to cover the cost of materials, machines, equipment, and specialized labor before there will be any nails to pound. Watch the Star for details. And so the construction began. And when I finished my oral presentation, we'll switch, and if I don't mess it up, we'll do a little PowerPoint so you can see what transpired up there in the fells. Now, starting on September 9th, there was a block ad that appeared, a block ad format, that appeared in the Winchester Star every single week. The community really was involved and concerned and wanted to offer their help for this project. And the Winchester Star, of course, wanted to see that to do whatever that they could do. So there was a progress report on the Girl Scout cabin. That was the title. This appeared week after week. And in one column was the contributions, and in the other column was what was needed. So I'll give you an idea of some of the things. Contributions: 2 kegs of nails from Al Elliott. 10,000 bricks from Phil Gallagher. Now, Phil Gallagher was a Rotarian, and he owned, I think it was called Winchester Brick Company. 10,000 bricks was a lot of bricks. Free advice, John Navarro. Certain number of gallons of paint by Frank Lane. A set of old law books by Bill Beggs. Lumber at cost from Dowland & Downs Lumber Company. Waterproof building paper by Brad Hersey. Brad Hersey's daughter is sitting right here. And then this space by the Star. And they needed finished lumber, window frames, less advice from Navarro, 4 gallons of varnish, legal tender from Bill Beggs and everybody, cement, handle for the hammer given by George Clark, so someone must have broken that one, and a number of other things to be mentioned later. The following week, contributed plumbing fixtures by Harry Sheffalo and Pat Foley. Now these are all things that they would have expected to go out and purchase. These were being donated free. Flagstone layer-in-chief, John Wallace. Kitchen equipment planned and given at cost by John Rutherford. Aspirin for the committee from Heavy's Drugstore. Heavy's Drugstore, if you can picture bookends, that was Heavy's Drugstore. 200 cement blocks by the Mass Cement Block Company. 5 gallons of stain by Hillside Paint and Wallpaper Company. I worked for Hillside Paint and Wallpaper Company from 1957 to 1962. So this was before my time. This space by the Star, and then lock sets and locks by Fell's Hardware Company. They still needed hardware for doors and windows, roofing material, flashings for the roof, window shades, money to buy all of the above, money to pay for skilled labor, and then just money. And then in the next week, September 23rd, power saw was loaned by Tip Murphy, large sign in the common loaned by the Winchester Hospital, sign decoration painted by Staff Rogers, a piano given by Mrs. Frank Edwards, 200 mounted birds donated by Fred Ives Jr. And I can tell you, 2 weeks later, they were looking for glass doors for the cabinet to house the mounted birds. So they didn't turn down anything. They used it all. A load of concrete was given by Wakefield Ready Mix Cement Company. And the list went on and on and on every single week. There were things, unbelievable things were donated. Things like air conditioning. Who would have thought of air conditioning in a Girl Scout cabin in 1949? So the reports went on every single week. And then on October 28th, this is from the Girl Scout report, Mrs. Burton Miller spoke of the cabin in glowing terms as a truly community effort. She described the wonderful cooperation of the men of the community who through such mediums as the Rotary Club have procured much of the materials needed for the cabin, either free or at cost. She told of the hours of skilled and unskilled labor given by the men and of the leaders of the Girl Scouts who served coffee to those on the job. She also spoke of the contributions made by many organizations in the community and said the men of the Water and Sewer Department were giving their time free to lay the pipes up to the cabin. Then from the Rotary notes, this is November 11th of 49, you should have seen Pat Foley in his overalls, and Charlie Murphy, Harry Sheffalo, Joe Moffat, Ralph Bonnell, Ralph Purrington dressed in their work clothes. Mal Bennett had a carpenter's apron on. So did Bill Heavey and John Wallace. You could go on forever, but that's the way they showed up for the regular luncheon meeting, which was called to order at 12:15 on Thursday, November 3rd by brick mover third class Charlie Murphy. And then these working clothes were a bit unusual. That was not normal dress. Normal dress in those days for a Rotary luncheon was a white shirt and a tie, and if it wasn't too hot, you had your suit on too. These working clothes are a bit unusual, but the motive was also unusual. For after the meeting, the members journeyed to the Girl Scout cabin and put in a full afternoon of work. So they worked after Rotary meetings. They worked Saturdays, Sundays. The amount of man hours, which you'll hear later, numbered about, someone figured 10,000 man hours were donated to build this cabin. And then Mrs. George Carey, the commissioner of the Girl Scouts in Winchester, announced that the dedication of the cabin would take place on December 4th. Now there were many articles that appeared in the newspapers in November, December, and into the following year about this cabin. And I'm not talking just the Winchester Star. Here's an article that was titled, Winchester to dedicate a $25,000 cabin for the Girl Scouts. Now, you're probably wondering how did we get from 15,000 to 25? When the cabin was finally completed and they were handing it over to the Girl Scouts, it was estimated that the value of the cabin was $25,000. In today's money, that would be about a little bit more than $250,000. And just a short little bit from this article from the Boston Globe. Every person in the town, school children and adults, contributed in some way, shape, or manner to the erection of the recreation cabin, which resembles a swank Swiss lodge, more than a replica of an early American building. Doctors, dentists, printers, soda counter men, laundry workers, gasoline service station owners, contractors, architects, students, town workers, the superintendent of schools, and the Winchester Hospital administrator are still nursing injured thumbs and sore backs received when they contributed 10,000 man labor hours on weekends, holidays, and afternoons to build the cabin. Armed with hammers, saws, and kegs of nails, men who did not know a crossbeam from a lally column pounded, sawed, molded, and gave breath of life to a dream cherished by the 600 Girl Scouts and 250 adults of the Winchester Council for the past 10 years. There was another article in the Globe, December 5th, and this talks about, this was an article about the dedication. So I mean, the amount of space that the Boston newspapers, the Globe, the Herald, the Boston Post, the Boston Traveler, and don't forget, they had morning, afternoon, and evening editions of all of these newspapers. So this one was titled $25,000 Girl Scout Cabin Dedicated in Middlesex Fells at Winchester. Then this is one from the Boston Traveler. Winchester Girl Scout Cabin could have cost $25,000. Here's another one from the Boston Post. Girl Scouts Hail Cabin. Winchester Rotary Club builds structure. And I'm just kind of watching my time here. This is from the Winchester Star, December 9th, 1949. This dream of the Winchester Council of Girl Scouts has revealed, en route to its completion, a wealth of friends we didn't know we had, and a community spirit among our men that snowballed into the building of our cabin. Many who came to watch stayed to help, some with hammer and sore thumbs, some with shovel, or some with concrete or bricks and mortar and aching backs. And many there were the plus little thinner pocketbook. The thing that most recently gave us a thrill was the following letter which Al Elliott received. And I quote, "On June 3rd, I gave the Girl Scout Building Fund a check with my tongue very much in my cheek because I did not believe it would be at all possible on a contract basis to construct the building plan for anything like the money the drive was aiming at or was likely to collect. Since that time, I have contributed only a few nails to the roof and 2 scun knees in the process. Your leadership and energy, however, have achieved such a wonderful example of community cooperation in building the cabin that I would like very much to help out further financially along the lines of our conversation of this morning and increase my original contribution. I am enclosing a check for," and the amount was left out, that was between the writer of the letter and Al, triple the amount of the first check that he wrote though, made out to the Winchester Girl Scout Building Fund for the use at your discretion at any point where you feel something additional is needed. I think the idea of a crazy patchwork quilt tiling job which you suggested could be a real addition to the future upkeep and cleanliness of the cabin, and I would be glad to have the check applied specifically for this purpose. Beyond this, my wife and I would like to extend our congratulations to you, Bill Davies, Mrs. Carey, Mrs. Metcalf, and all the many others who contributed so much in the way of personal enthusiasm, energy, effort, and materials to the success of this undertaking. It is a perfectly swell job, Al. You all can be proud of it. With best regards, sincerely yours, a Girl Scout father. And in those ads from the Star that I was sharing with you earlier, on more than one occasion in the needed column, Al would always add in, "We need more Girl Scout fathers." It was a little gentle nudge to them to get out and help. And then on February 5th, 1950, the cabin having been already dedicated and in use, this letter appeared. "We realized before it's too late that we had left Al Elliott and the Rotary Club out on a limb by dedicating the Girl Scout cabin before the actual work was completed. For the next 2 weekends, we need men to stain the interior of the cabin. It's even heated inside now, so come on early Saturday or Sunday and help finish the cabin by Washington's birthday." I'm uncertain as to when Camp Joy was abandoned by the Girl Scouts. I'm assuming it was sometime in the 70s. The cabin was destroyed by fire on the afternoon of April 3rd, 1984. The actual article that I took that date from said an electrical fire, but that too is speculation, I believe. And at some point in time, I'm sure Al and I would be more than happy to share additional facts about the demise and end of the Girl Scout cabin. And before we go to the pictures, because I know I can go through those fairly quickly, this article from the Boston Sunday Post, April 23rd, 1950, is just such a descriptive article. I think it will really give you an idea of this whole process. Camp Joy, reigning majestically on a wooded knoll of Winchester's Middlesex Fells, is a queen with a Cinderella story. The 5-section Girl Scout cabin is as ultra-modern as its air conditioning system, as fashionable as its all-electric kitchen, as impressive as its interior-exterior fireplace, built of enough bricks to construct a house. Winchester real estate experts conservatively quote its value at $25,000, but money was a secondary factor in its construction. The cabin is preconceived in the imagination of Winchester's 678 Girl Scouts was to be a rough and ready base for communing with nature. Never did they anticipate the luxury that is now theirs. And when a fundraising drive stumbled to an abrupt stop last summer, far short of the goal, thoughts of the cabin to be gave way to disappointment. It was then that the Scouts asked the local Rotary Club for a helping hand. President Charles Murphy and his fellow Rotarian Alfred D. Elliott, a building contractor, reached a decision which later was to be accepted by the entire membership. "We won't help you raise a cent," they responded roguishly, immediately adding, "We'll build the cabin." To provide leaders, building talents were funneled into a committee. Joining Chairman Elliott were his brother Sid Elliott and Nicholas Fitzgerald, also contractor. He was also a contractor. Electrician William Cleary and plumber Harry Sheffalo added their skills. The start was fairly slow, explains Murphy, but after digging the foundation, this was the day after Labor Day, it mushroomed. It seemed that everyone in town got into the spirit of the thing. Guess everyone thought helping the kids would be fun. That's how it was with Al Elliott and me. We liked to go fishing, you see, but getting out with the gang to put the cabin together was more fun. The volunteers worked weekends for the most part. 2 skilled workers, a foreman and a carpenter, were given full-time tasks. They laid out the work, put lumber on electric saws, and coordinated efforts of the amateurs. An estimated 10,000 hours of labor was donated by more than 200 townspeople. Fathers of the Scouts got into the act. Old-timers who hadn't banged a nail for 4 or 5 decades aided with the lighter chores. Businessmen followed the example of Harry Damon. The tannery company executive offered his personal assistance and brought 20 employees to the scene to dig a water and sewer ditch by hand. Money raising wasn't neglected by the Girl Scouts. They continued to do house cleaning tasks, sell seashells, babysit, pick blueberries, accept any job that promised to net a penny or a dollar profit. Encourage Winchester Women's Club held fairs and individual benefactors. Many people unable to assist physically contributed financially. Sure, it cost probably $10,000, said the Rotarians, but chiseling gave us the luxury. Chiseling got us the best materials and equipment. Many items didn't cost a cent, others we got at wholesale. This chiseling, which Winchester readily discusses with a sly wink, consisted of a full-scale effort to acquaint manufacturers and distributors with the worthy cause. Generosity became contagious. Before completion of the cabin, plans were altered many times to fit gifts into the building pattern. The air conditioning system, the kind found in $50,000 homes, was an unexpected addition. Original plans did not include a 10 by 50 foot flagstone terrace, oil heat, or a tile-walled shower. But as they received it, they found a way to incorporate it. However, the rough pine cabin, measuring 41 by 55 feet, was built with sweat as well as with enthusiasm and generosity. Half of the 70 roof timbers weighed more than 300 pounds each and taxed the strength of the men who positioned them. Many hand numbed to the fall and winter cold. Casualties were few, with Joe Moffat, the funeral director. Joe owned Costello's. He was boasted the most serious injury. After he hammered his thumb with a powerful but misdirected blow, appropriate ceremonies during the next Rotary Club meeting accompanied awarding a Purple Heart facsimile. Dedication ceremonies were conducted December 4th, nearly 2 months before tools and portable generators were returned to the owners. 1,500 guests, including the kids, who henceforth would be occupants, tread across the blue and tan kitchen linoleum. Mothers lingered in the kitchen to voice approval of the spangling white electric stove, hot water heater, and electric refrigerator. Stainless steel sinks and knotty pine cabinets caught many a matronly eye. Youngsters were duly excited about the fireplace, opening like a huge mouth from the 16-foot wide living room chimney. They were told that the hand-hewn mantle timber is over 200 years old. This room is the camp's recreation center. More than 1,100 square feet of floor space is covered by tan linoleum, interrupted in the spot forward of the fireplace by a green Girl Scout insignia. Above the fireplace is the head of a moose. At the opposite end of the room is a deer's head. Yellow curtains inject a feminine touch. And I will say that if you'd like to see the curtains, that bag was made from the curtains that hung in the Girl Scouts Camp Joy.
That's fine.
So the yellow curtains inject a feminine touch in overhead fluorescent lamps, giving a direct subdued effect. Colored posters depicting the Cotswolds, Royal Leamington Spa, the Severn at Shrewsbury, Ross on Wye, and other British scenes are the only decorations on Naughty Pine walls. The international posters are educational media acquainting the Scouts with communities of England and Scotland. 13 members of the Winchester group, accompanied by 4 adults, will set sail July 14th for a bicycle train tour covering 1,000 miles in the 2 countries. Anticipating British hospitality, they plan to extend an invitation to English Scouts to visit their camp in the future. 2 cabin rooms accommodate overnight campers. Adults, not more than 2, may sleep in the downstairs staff room, and beds for 18 youngsters fill the upstairs bunk room. Considering the manner in which the Girl Scouts cabin veers from the usual, it perhaps is not extraordinary that the girls should give the privilege of an overnight christening to a dozen visitors from Montreal. 10 Canadian Girl Scouts and 2 leaders were the first to enjoy the camp's sleeping comforts during a 3-day visit from April 14th to 16th. Before Winchester children remain overnight, their leaders must take a training course at the camp. Mrs. Barbara Metcalf, head of Winchester's Girl Scouts, has programmed camp activities for many months to come. Featured are outdoor cooking and nature walks. Fathers who are still nursing sore muscles and calloused hands will be entertained at a cookout on Father's Day. A tea and fashion show will bring mothers to the camp. So that, with one exception, ends the oral part of the presentation. Probably some of you are saying thankfully. But I get sidetracked when I do these history projects, particularly going through the Star, because there's just so many other stories of equal interest to me. But as I was doing this, I happened to come across this one, January 6, 1933, and this was probably a quarter-page ad by McLaughlin Shoe Company. McLaughlin Shoe was on Thompson Street, where, you know, that little alleyway where Piantadosi's Bakery used to be. From that corner heading back out towards Main Street, McLaughlin Shoe was there, and actually they were there well up into the 60s, 70s, right. And in his ad that day, advertising all from art supporting shoes to women's shoes, men's shoes, Girl Scout shoes for $3.65. So with that, why don't we look at some pictures, if I can handle this. Future. 2 cabin rooms accommodate overnight campers. Adults, not more than 2, may sleep in the downstairs staff room, and beds for 18 youngsters fill the upstairs bunk room. Considering the manner in which the Girl Scouts cabin veers from the usual, it perhaps is not extraordinary that the girls should give the privilege of an overnight christening to a dozen visitors from Montreal. 10 Canadian Girl Scouts and 2 leaders were the first to enjoy the camp's sleeping comforts during a 3-day visit from April 14th to 16th. Before Winchester children remain overnight, their leaders must take a training course at the camp. Mrs. Barbara Metcalf, head of Winchester's Girl Scouts, has programmed camp activities for many months to come. Featured are outdoor cooking and nature walks. Fathers who are still nursing sore muscles and calloused hands will be entertained at a cookout on Father's Day. A tea and fashion show will bring mothers to the camp. So that, with one exception, ends the oral part of the presentation. Probably some of you are saying thankfully. But I get sidetracked when I do these history projects, particularly going through the Star, because there's just so many other stories of equal interest to me. But as I was doing this, I happened to come across this one, January 6, 1933, and this was probably a quarter-page ad by McLaughlin Shoe Company. McLaughlin Shoe was on Thompson Street, where, you know, that little alleyway where Piantadosi's Bakery used to be. From that corner heading back out towards Main Street, McLaughlin Shoe was there, and actually they were there well up into the 60s, 70s, right. And in his ad that day, advertising all from art supporting shoes to women's shoes, men's shoes, Girl Scout shoes for $3.65. So with that, why don't we look at some pictures, if I can handle this. I'll have to apologize for the quality of some of these pictures. This came from the Boston Globe, June 7th, 1931. And this was the dedication ceremony at the original site of the Girl Scout cabin in the Brooks Estates. Now, the Brooks Estates cabin the entrance to it was off of Grove Street. The town forest abuts the Brooks Estates property. Matter of fact, somebody in Rotary told me that they run over through there and that the foundation and pad from the original Girl Scouts cabin is still sitting there. So here's some Girl Scouts from Winchester. I don't know if you can identify any of those. This is from 1949.
We were in high school then.
Okay. They were saying goodbye. That's the old camp. And you can't see it very well, but that's all made from logs and timbers, and I think that's what they envisioned that they would get when they got up to the fells. This is the entire brochure. There's a copy out here. They had a 4-page brochure that they put together and handed out around town for their biolog program. And this is the day of the dedication of the site. They were so excited, I guess they decided, well, let's start partying now. So the town put up the flagpole for them, and they put the flag up. Now here's some of the blocks that were donated in the back. I guess I don't have to read the names, they're right there for you. Those were both Rotarians. That's Al Elliott in the middle, and Dr. Churchill Hines on the right-hand side, and a couple of young fellows that were helping them out. Fran McFeely, the gentleman on the far left, he was a Rotarian, and he was the head of the Boy Scouts in Winchester. Nick Elliott was a relative of Sid and Al's. And then Charlie Murphy, Charlie was the president of Rotary 1949-1950. Charlie owned the old gas station down here across from, there's still a gas station there, but across from Mahoney's on the corner of Pond Street. Walter Cunningham, John Healy, Al Elliott laying the foundation. You can see that's a pretty good run. Took a lot of blocks to lay that foundation. Sam Anglese, he was a volunteer, and Dr. John Raymond Wallace, he was a Rotarian. A long way to go. That's Dr. John McLean, who's a podiatrist here in town, and also a Rotarian. Charlie Coach. Charlie Coach owned the Winchester, he was a Rotarian, he owned the Winchester Sports Shop for many, many years down on Church Street. And Walter Cunningham was a volunteer. There's Charlie and Walter and George Snelling. The Snellings, I think, lived on Lakeview, down off of... There's the Reverend John Snook from the Methodist Church with his daughters. I'm assuming they were probably Girl Scouts. He probably came to bless the site, and I don't know if he was one of the few that maybe got out of that site because of the way he was dressed. Most of the men in town that would go up dressed like that, they still wouldn't let them leave without making them lug some bricks or some lumber. There's John Wallace and Sam Anglese laying the foundation, Ira Caldwell. And some of these workers certainly had some expertise in building, which was a great boon for the Rotarians. There's Al Elliott. They're looking at the plans. Harold Thistlethwaite, Nick Elliott, Cubby Carroll, Paul White, all volunteers. Gordon Bird was a Rotarian, and there's John McLean taking their coffee break.
That's Buzzy Bird's father.
That was long before Dunkin' Donuts. There's Nick and Sid Elliott. That's Al's brother. and also a longtime Rotarian. Dr. Seymour Russell, if you remember Seymour, Seymour was the dentist here in town. He was a past president of the club and longtime secretary of the club. And Don Simons, a Rotarian. W. Allen Wild, his company is still down in the center, just outside the center. You still see the sign there on the building. Ralph Purrington and Phil Pollard, that's Dr. Pollard's son. His father was a Rotarian, and there's his father right there, Dr. Pollard, Bridgeworth. And most of these, Charlie Coach was a Rotarian, Dick Hawkinson was a dentist here in town, he was a Rotarian, Joe Moffett, Dr. Blanchard, and Abe Bradley and Hoyt Steves were volunteers. There's Joe Moffett working on the roof. Here's...
Just me underneath the moose.
She's in the picture.
Oh my God.
Under the moose head. That's my mother.
Is that
That's
you?
me.
That's you right there.
That's
And
my
that's
mother.
your mother right
That's
there?
my mother.
Oh, that's neat.
Isn't that pretty neat?
Cool.
And there's the moose head they were talking about. Look at the size of that fireplace. When you have 10,000 bricks, you can do a lot of things. And that's Charlie Murphy, the president of the club at the time, and he was receiving a gift from the Girl Scouts. This is just to show you what those weekly reports in the Star look for. Mrs. Al Elliott sent up apple turnovers, Fell's Hardware, a couple of kegs of nails, and then, oh, this is neat. Oh, this is far beyond anything. This is my second PowerPoint, and I did have a wonderful assistant, but I did not have something like this. This is huge. Myron Burlow and Dorothy Muriel. For those that don't know, Myron Burlow owned a gift shop down in Winchester, more known, I guess, for his lamps and lampshades, but had a gift shop for many years. And then Dorothy Muriel was on Main Street. That was a bakery with some food stuff. They sold eggs, and I do know from my research in the Star that Dorothy Muriel every Saturday night had a special for takeout of a tub of baked beans and brown bread. And then Freddie McCormick from McCormick's Apothecary provided Sloan's liniment for all the and God and his money said other things. Fred used to distribute. It was amazing back in those days how many snake bites there were here in Winchester. And of course, if you had a snake bite, you didn't go to the hospital, you went to Freddie. And in Freddie's basement at the pharmacy, he had special stuff, especially dispensed for snake bite.
Really?
And you used to take it internally. So. They needed folding chairs and tables, flooring material, more cooperation from Scout Fathers, more coffee. And then you can see Beggs and Cobbs also one day sent down 18 men. Beggs and Cobbs was located where Parkview Apartments is now. It was the last tannery here in town. And they sent down 18 men for a half a day's work.
Those apple turnovers that Mrs. Al Elliott, she made those herself.
Oh, I'm sure she did.
Really good.
And then this is the invitation that went out to the dedication. And then this also was part of the invitation. That's an artist's rendering of the cabin. And there's a nice shot of the cabin. They are cooking up something on that beautiful stove. And there's a picture of Al Elliott. He was an unbelievable individual here in town. He did a lot for the town of Winchester. And that's a great picture of what the final cabin building looked like. This was taken from the next series of pictures are all from postcards. That's what the upstairs dormitory area looked like. There's the kitchen with the naughty pine, there's the hot water heater and refrigerator with a freezer. More of the bricks, so let's build a fireplace outside.
They were all, everybody had one of those at that time.
And everything in here was all donated, all the furnishings, there's the piano that was donated. And here we are, I end up with the artist rendering, which came to life pretty good. So I hope you all enjoyed the presentation, and thank you very much.